On today's show, it is part 2 of 2 talking about Trae Young with Glen Willis, and we'll get into all of that right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1805 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Tuesday evening into Wednesday here at the end of September. And today's podcast is sponsored by the folks at the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Terms apply. I also will tell you at the top of the podcast, as I always do on the show, to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Please check us out and subscribe to the podcast across the board. That includes on YouTube. Please like this episode and subscribe on that platform. We're also on all the audio channels that you know and love: Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast, etc. Please go ahead and check out part 1 of this conversation if you have not already. That's my plug at the top of the show. This is part 2 of 2 with myself and Glen Willis talking about Trae Young. I recommend highly starting at the beginning of this conversation. So part 1 is available in the same podcast feed right now. You want to go there first. And when you come back, part 2, we'll dive in right now to the rest of the conversation with myself and Glen. Please stay tuned for this as well as anything else in the podcast. It's going to be very busy coming up. Training camp begins next week. Preseason is coming fast and furious. We're going to be wall to wall, as we always are on the podcast, talking all things Atlanta Hawks. So thanks for listening. I appreciate you guys being here. We'll dive back in right now with myself and Glen Willis. I want to go a little bit big picture beyond the offense, right? Because we could go for an hour on this. We don't have to. About his defense and the team building aspect and the lineup aspect. I'll lead with this because I found it today. I thought it was really interesting. We've all shared this number, I bet you. This is not the new one I'm about to reference, but about how the Hawks were +3 net rating with Trae on and DeJounte off last year. They were like even or something like that with DeJounte on and Trae off. So they actually weren't bad with Trae off the floor last year in a way that they had always been before that. So that's a credit to DeJounte in a lot of ways. But the two of them together was a -6 net rating. It's the only team in the league where they're and this includes the bad teams, where you have 2 star or fringe star level players, former All-Stars, etc., who had that bad of a net rating playing together as the top 2 players on the team. Like it was a disaster. For whatever reason, it is what it is. The step below that, and this is why I'm going to go to the defense too a little bit, is that I found this number on Cleaning the Glass today. It actually blew my mind. So last year, if you just took the minutes with Trae on the court without DeJounte or Patty Mills. So for me, those are the 2 small defensive challenge guards. If you want to throw in Kobe Buffkin because he was a rookie, you could do that, and it doesn't change the numbers at all. Actually, it's almost exactly the same. The Hawks had a +6.5 net rating with that alignment. Now, you could say it's cherry picking. That's fine. It was a pretty decent sample size of Trae and not a small guard next to him, whether it was Bogey or whoever at the 2, Veet, Garrison, et cetera, et cetera. They were really, really good in kind of the way that they are kind of setting up to align this year, which means Trae won't be playing with a small guard much at all. And if it is one, it's going to be Kobe.
Yeah, that's like top 2-3 team in the league level. +6.6 you have three or 4 teams like that some seasons that are at that level of net rating.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the Hawks are going to be a +6 net rating team this year. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is they were quite good last year with a similar alignment to what the Hawks are going to be doing this year, where I would imagine the smallest guy that will play next to Trae on any sort of regular basis this year is maybe Kobe Buffkin, if he even does. And Kobe's 6'5", and Kobe can play defense. So they're no longer doing the small guard thing. And by the way, I know DeJounte is not small, but he weighs 180 pounds, and he plays small on defense. He just does. You can at me if you want to. That's my opinion, but I think he just does. And Patty Mills, God bless him. And it was a small sample size. Yeah. Patty was really bad last year. A small sample size, but he was not very helpful. So
yeah. I had mental jokes about like when Patty was bringing the ball up a few times last year. I was like, can I get to the fridge and get a drink and get back before Patty gets the ball up? Just little. But for me, it's like that's. People ask me, like, what happened last year? And I am not speaking for Quinn Snyder. No one should ever speak for Quinn Snyder. Quinn Snyder will barely speak for Quinn Snyder. Quinn Snyder feels like sometimes. But I felt like, why are they getting to dig to the level of the screen over and over? And Bogey's low man, Trae's low man, Sadiq's like, and it's just like, it looks like a defensive mess, right? My interpretation is Quinn was like, this is how we're going to play. This is our future. This is how we're going to play. And I need everyone to see that this roster can't do that, right? And that's why, for me, like all the work they did on this roster, person 9 through 15 or whatever, however we're counting that, more size, more length, more athleticism. It's just to me, that's gonna be night and day. Like you and I talked about it across this series. Does it stick in game 1 or game 21 or game 4? Like, I have no idea. Like, when all that length and stuff starts to functionally kind of work together and show up. But I just that was the thing for me. It was like, who did you want to be a low man? When Clint's way up to 4 at the level of the screen. So for me, like having Dyson, having Veet, having Kobe, I think is an emerging defensive player, right? We'll see how consistent he is this year, right? And there are others, right? And just having size, you can put size at the 2 and the 3 in a way that they couldn't last year. You can play 3 wings if you want and make your biggest one the 4 this year in a way that you couldn't last year. And so I think it's going to really move the needle on defense. But like I said, it could take a while to click. It could take a while for all of it to kind of settle in and kind of have that impact. But for me, I think it's. I watched these last 2 off seasons, right? And I felt like last off season, you and I saw all the trade rumors, like, chasing Siakam, and I don't know. We don't have to revisit all those things, right? But I tell people, by all accounts, 2 summers ago, they tried really hard to change the roster. They tried really, really hard, but they weren't going to overpay like they did with DeJounte, right? And that was good work to not overpay. This past year, they worked on the bottom half of the roster, and man, they took it up a lot. I mean, a ton. Right. And we'll see how much that helps. But this should make Trae's job easier on defense. You got guys now, like last year, they didn't really have a guy that could just get Trae out of trouble. Now they have like 4 guys that could just get Trae. Oh, Trae, you're in a bad spot. I got you. Boom, go. Oh, you're low man. No. You get up high. I'm low. I got it. Right. And I mean, last year it was like, oh, great. Sadiq's trading spots was Trae. This is like 10% better,
Yeah.
And this year there's just way more players that can kind of get in and keep Trae out of trouble. I want to ask coaches, like, is it a bigger priority to keep Trae from being low man or keeping Trae from getting switched onto the ball handler, right? It probably is situational on, well, how dynamic is the other ball handler, or what have you. But I mean, I'm so excited to watch this team, to see all of the creative little ways that they now use their size and length and actual impacted defenders to less frequently get Trae stuck in a bad spot. It was persistent. It was like, it felt like it was nonstop last season.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Football is here in a big way. If you're an NFL fan, start the season right with a big return at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. If you happen to have a hunch in the middle of a game, check out a ton of different information sets, from a live stats and play-by-play to the latest overarching stuff and much more, on the same page when you are placing your bets at FanDuel Sportsbook. You also get started with a great offer from FanDuel, and that is $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. You should also know the FanDuel Sportsbook app is really easy to use as well. They have everything that you're looking for in the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads to live betting. They have money lines and player props, same-game parlays, future bets, and much more. The app is safe and secure at FanDuel. They cover the entire range of sports as well. That includes the NBA, as you might expect. Listen to this podcast. WNBA is there, NFL, college football, baseball, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. And now is an awesome time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. One more time, visit FanDuel.com and check out America's #1 sportsbook. No, we totally agree. And part of that sample I cited before about them playing Trae as the only small guard, most of their gains were on offense, right? That's not a huge surprise. When Trae's on the court, you're off its first team, almost by design. But they were also like 38th percentile defense, which is all they have to be. Like, that's the thing. They don't have to be great defensively with this roster makeup. They got to be okay. And that's where they have not been. That's very broad on purpose for this conversation, but they have to be. What do you broadly even make about Trae's defensive games? Because like I often cite that I believe Trae has taken a pretty noticeable step forward. He's not the same guy he used to be when he was 19, 20 years old, when he actually was one of the worst defenders in the league. And I think that was true. He's not Gary Payton. I'm not saying he is, but I think he has improved. For instance, like he had a career high steal rate last year. He's been much more active with his hands. His advanced numbers are way better. His EPM, all those, they're way better. They're not first percentile where like he used to be at the bottom of Raptor and all those things. It's not that anymore. So I have almost 2 questions for you here. Maybe almost 3. Where is he now? Where has he grown? And where can he still grow? Is kind of the thing about Trae, because obviously we held off for 40 minutes talking about his defense really on this conversation because it's not the headliner, but it does matter. And look, there's nowhere else. I should say there's no one else to blame. But I think if you take the collective team step forward that we're hoping they take defensively this year, part of that has to be him doing his job too. Like I'm never trying to absolve Trae. He is a factor. He has to be a part of a winning defense. So I know it's like a rambling question, but like, what have you observed? Like where can this go if he continues to like be bought in defensively?
To me, it starts with being an active part of keeping yourself out of trouble. And I thought he did that a lot better last year. Now, when he's asking for help, he's looking around. It's like, well, you're 15% better than me. Right. Again, that's going to be different this year. So number one is like Steph Curry is incredible. Has for years been incredible at being like, hey, Dre, get me. Or, when it's KD there or whoever, right? Just seeing like they're trying to do this to me, being the first person to recognize they are trying to do this to me and to get me and to keep me out of this bad. So that's where it starts with. And I thought there was a good improvement from him last year. The second part for me is I thought he did a better job in a timely way, jumping passing lanes, being disruptive, right? Being one of the greatest passers to me in history, right? You can see, Trae knows what the other point guard, what the other creators are trying to do. He knows what they're running. He knows where the pass is trying to go. Now, he doesn't always have the size to kind of, if it's a lob, he's not going to get there, right? But a skip pass to the corner, whatever it might be, a ball rotation, what have you, he can see those things. And I thought he did that off and on last year at times. And in there's a few games that won where he made a huge play down the stretch. The other thing he did last year, I thought he sacrificed his body a number of times to keep possessions, taking charges, sprinting back on defense, right? And so for me, I feel like, what is the standard? It's a little bit hard for me to say, I want him to be opportunistic. I want him to manage his defensive commitment to time, score, and situation to know, like, this is the time I have to be all out on this defensive possession, right? It's the offensive workload he has. It's unrealistic to expect it to be every single possession the whole game. But what you can do when you're not at that, possession that has really, really elevated importance is keep yourself out of trouble, communicate, stay connected, ask for help. Notice when the other team's offense is breaking down and when you can jump and be disruptive. Can you dig at the nail? Can you jump the passing lane? Can you do all that sort of stuff? And that's where I want to see more consistency this next year, right? Because I thought, I don't know, if you're like, Glenn, was he doing that 30% of the time last year or 60% of the time? I'd be like, I don't know, 40% of the time. That's just a total swag on my part, right?
Sure.
But, but for me, when I watch Trae, I don't want it to be like, you got to do this every single possession. Like, no, right? But when there's the opportunity, what I want watching him and putting on my youth coach lens, right, is when the opportunity is there to make a play, make that play, right? And that might look a little bit off and on because of the offensive usage that he has. But when the opportunity to make a play is there, he makes the play. He's not like, oh, I was a second late. No, he sees the breakdown coming. He jumps in. He makes that play. He gets them going in transition. They get easy buckets the other way. That's what I feel like I want to see.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think I mentioned the steal rate going up, and it did to an above average level last year. And part of that's he's got great hands. Like, he's very quick with his hands, and like he can maximize that. There are things. Look, I think I said this on the mailbag on Friday that I did by myself. Ultimately, Trae can't fix the fact that he's 6'1", 180. He just can't. There's a limitation there. But he can do the things that you just laid out. He can create havoc a little bit on digs, using his hands, making reads, being aggressive, being bought in. You mentioned the drawn charge. I just want to confirm this number. He was top 20 in the league last year in charges drawn while missing 28 games. Like, he was thrown on the team because Garrison is a charge magnet above probably the whole. Like, I think Garrison might have led the league last year in charges per minute drawn. I'm not even being funny. I think he actually did lead the league in charges per minute. And then Clint had a lot too. But Trae was thrown on the team in top 20 in the league in charges drawn. Yeah. Like, that's buying in. And granted, that's only 12 or 13 plays. I get it. I don't want to overstate it. But early in his career, he didn't do that.
But situationally, they have the value, right? Situationally, like, they won a game. They won a game because he took a charge. Right.
There were several moments. I mean, even people that don't watch every possession like we do, there were moments. And look, I'm isolated moments, and you hope for more of them. But there were moments where, like, he jumped off the screen with the way he was defending, particularly in fourth quarters. And I'm glad you said it, because there is a variable where, like, it gets overstated where, like, guys are supposed to do this every single possession. Lead creators on offense do not have that workload every possession, and they basically can't. Like, you have to participate. I'm not saying you go to sleep on defense, but your effort level can't be at 100 every possession on defense when you are 35% used on offense. It's just not realistic. No one does that. It doesn't matter. Name a guy, they don't do it. I promise you there isn't a single player in the league that's a primary option on offense that is a 100 percentile effort defender. It can't happen over 82 games. It can't.
Yeah. Go watch Jalen Brunson get hunted in the playoffs.
They all get hunted. They're small.
Ridiculous offensive run last year, right?
Yeah.
Tyrese Halliburton, like, absolutely got hunted, right? And Jalen knows what he's getting big. Jalen knows he's getting put in a bad spot. Like, he absolutely knows that. He knows what he can't do. You and I talked before. Part of being a great player is understanding the things that you can't do and keeping yourself out of the situation of having to do something you can't do, right? And I mean, I love watching Tyrese Halliburton play. Like, sorry, Trae's better than him in my mind. It's not even close, right?
I think so.
But he's fun. He's ascending, and that is not a slight. I love watching Tyrese Halliburton, but on defense, he's a wreck. He is a complete wreck right now. Am I rooting for him in the next season or two to, like, because I love it. I love watching him. You know. But that's just, an interesting thing. So again, people, I think the most unfair context around Trae is people single him out and act like he's the only person who has these issues that he has,
Mm-hmm.
that he does the thing. It is just completely not true. It's straight out gaslighting to be like, Trae's the only one who does this. And I'm like, if I didn't work, 60 hours a week, I would go find clips of every other league guard in the league doing the exact same things, right? But those people are not worth my time. So, it does come back to, like, really understanding situational opportunity and when the opportunity is there to make an impact, he is on it and he makes that impact. He makes that play and he helps his team. And to me, that's what success looks like on defense for him. Number one, stay out of trouble. Number two, be opportunistic in your playmaking defensively.
Yeah, both can be true, right? Like, he does have limitations. He is not a good defender. Like, all these things, it's all true. But the caricature is that's the word I always use, and I'll use it again. There is a caricature of Trae Young's defense that's just not comparatively true compared to the rest of the league. It's just not. He's not as bad as people want to think that he is. He's just not. And even, honestly, even at his absolute worst, I don't know. I still don't even know if that guy was as bad as people think that he is. It's like it's like the way that he's talked about as if the Hawks are defending 4-on-5. That's the way he's talked about, which is not the case. And he has improved, but it's still a problem. In the playoffs, should the Hawks get to the playoffs this year and play a series, every time, and you know this, Glenn, every time that they've been in a series, he has been hunted. And he will always be hunted. That is playoff basketball. When things slow down, when teams can game plan for you, they're going to go after Trae. That's going to happen forever. It's not going to change.
Yeah, Steph Curry has won how many championships? And he still gets hunted, right?
Correct.
Steph is a top 10 all-time player, right? And he still gets hunted. So it's not some, like, mark of shame at all. That's just, it comes with the profile of the player that he is. So, but like I said, does he need to do better for the team to do well? Yes. Would Trae say that?
Agreed.
I completely think he would say that, right? And for me, I've laid out what I think. I'm not an NBA coach, but I've laid out what I'm looking for and kind of what my expectations are, whatever they're worth, whatever they're not worth, fine, right? But for me is keep yourself out of trouble, be an opportunistic discipline maker. And that, to me, that's a good enough next step for me.
Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is the best place to find tickets. There's nothing like checking out a live event, whether it is sports or music or comedy or theater. They also have a new feature at Game Time called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets even easier for you. They take away all the stuff through a filter that you actually don't need and show you the incredible deals on great seats that you do need. So there's no wasting time searching through thousands of different tickets. For example, there are awesome deals all the time, and especially for the Hawks season opener on October 23rd at home against Brooklyn, including a pair of tickets right now for $27 each, including fees at Game Time. That's an awesome deal, of course. There's more of that happening all the time at Game Time. Plus, my personal favorite feature at Game Time is the checking out the seats, and through the all-in pricing, there are no surprise fees at the checkout screen at the end. Also get a view from your seats in the app that's panoramic before you buy them, so you know exactly what you're getting into when you get to that venue that you are looking to buy from, and you're getting the lowest possible price guaranteed with the folks at Game Time. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account with Game Time. Redeem that promo code. It is LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. Yeah, and certainly he knows, like, you know, Trae has gotten more mature in a lot of ways, but the way he talks about himself in public is one of those ways. Like, he's way more introspective than he's used to be when he was younger. And he knows. It's not like it's a big secret. The Hawks know what Trae is and what he isn't on defense. Like, it's not about being too proud. Like, he's gotten more willing to scrape himself out of switches, and like, he knows, like, guys still know they have to watch out for Trae. And that sounds negative, but it's not. It's what you said before it's perfectly the way to put it, is that be aware of what you can and can't do, but also be a part of the solution, I think is what Quinn would say. Just be a part of it. Be active,
Yep.
Be in the mix, do your job.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of the baseline. It's funny, Glenn. Usually at this point of the podcast, we would kind of do all right, what's this guy's role going to be for this season? We kind of know what Trae's role is. We talked around it a little bit about, like, there's some nuance, of course, about like how much usage, all those things. But is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to hit on? Because I feel like it's how do I say this? We often don't do the contract stuff because it's not your thing, right? It's not your specialty. But I think it's a big year for Trae. And I've said it before, but I'll say it on this app. I feel like I have to say it on this episode. He has 2 years left in his contract, including this year. And then there's a player option. And in taking kind of the pulse of the league, look, I'm not saying he was on the block this summer, because he wasn't. That's been overstated in trades. But, he's no longer in a situation where he's like, they hang up the phone immediately when you call. If it was 3 years ago, if you called the Hawks on Trae Young, they would either laugh at you or they'd hang up. That was not the case this last few months. But it's more of a team thing. But it's a big year for Trae, because the perception of him is that it may be an all-time low, all those things. I just want to say that out loud. Like, if this doesn't go well, it's going to be you're going to hear lots and lots and lots of trade stuff in a year if there's not improvement, not necessarily from him, but from the team context. If the vibe isn't better, like it's a big swing year for organization and player, I think.
Yeah. So there's 2 things I want to hit on. This was one of them. And for me, it cuts both ways. It's not just Trae doing better. It's the team actually putting a roster construction around him that sets him up for success. He's good enough to be an all-star every year. He's good enough to get real votes for All-NBA every year, right? That stuff's not going to happen for you if you're not winning enough games, right? We know that. And Trae, for whatever reason, has a little bit of, I don't know, image or whatever, like inertia out there that he has to kind of work around, those sorts of things. The other thing, the big thing that I wish, if I could ask Quinn one question about Trae, it's at end of the game, you need a bucket. Is it an absolute given that you're going to Trae every single time, right? I mean, largely NBA coaches are like, it's funny, the Hawks played the Timberwolves a couple years ago, and the camera caught part of the Wolves huddle, and you heard Tim say to Jimmy Butler, "Where do you want it?" And Jimmy said, "The nail." And that's kind of how end of game goes a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trae's smaller, right? Sometimes you're not as likely to get a call on the last possession the way you did the rest of the game. We know 2 years ago, like they designed some plays for Trae to deliver the ball to AJ, and AJ had two game winners, right? I would love to know for Quinn is Trae the passer on the last possession? Is he the scorer? Are you isolating for Trae on the last possession? Are you just clearing it out? Or are you letting him try to go draw a foul? Like because I think it's harder for small guards to kind of create as much space, create the other right. And so what would you guess is like we know Trae just on paper simplified view deserves the opportunity to go get winning buckets. I mean, he made that 3-pointer in the Celtics series, a year and a half back, right? And we know he's capable of making plays in the game, but sometimes depending upon who's guarding him, what the defensive scheme is that the right way to go? That's a big open question for me. And I'm, their fourth quarter performance was terrible by all standards last year, among the worst in the league, last year. So is there a different approach there or not? I'm curious about that. I'm curious if you have a view on that.
Yeah, of course it's hard to tell, but you're right to point out that he is not the kind of guy, and especially we praise his offense, and I believe everything we've said. He isn't the kind of guy that's going to be able to just get his shot off anytime like someone like a 6'7" wing can do, because certain matchups, if he gets a big wing on him, he might beat that guy, but he can't just rise up and shoot over you in a way that a lot of these number one wings can do. So it is a little bit limited. What they've done in the past a lot is I feel like I can see them in my mind right now. Trae likes to take the pull-up three, which he's comfortable doing in big situations. He takes the pull-up three, and he loves his floater. How many game-tying, game-winning floater attempts has Trae taken in his career? It's a pretty high number. He likes that floater. He just does. But you got to get there.
Yeah.
Maybe the solution for me is try to get him in pick and roll, even though you don't often see pick and roll at the end of games, but maybe that's something. And I don't think he's ever going to be the kind of guy who always shoots it. I think he'll have the ball in his hands. But to your point about AJ before, some other, I think it's Trae is priority one, but Trae, we're going to put the trust in you to make the right play. A lot of guys are like, hey, you're going to shoot it unless you absolutely can't. Trae's not that way. I think part of that is his appeal as a passer. I think Quinn's gonna be okay, Trae, ball is yours, make the right play versus Trae, take the right shot. Does that make sense? Hopefully that does. I don't know.
It does. Yeah, and it's kind of, I'll try this quickly, but you go back historically, when Lloyd Pierce was the coach, it was always Trae with the ball, and John Collins would come up and give Trae the option of getting a screen or saying, no, get away. I like the angle I have, right? And 5 years ago, that was the approach for guards was bring a guy up. Do you want a pitch back? Do you want a screen? Do you want this? Do you want me to get out of the way? Just send me away, right? And give Trae all those options in real time. And Trae is such a freaking great processor that he can no, I see this, I want this, right? But they, when they kind of took over, it was different, right? What you're describing is I remember the Tony Snell game winner was an example of Trae giving the ball up and hitting a wide open, high level shooter, for that game winner against Toronto. And I think they were playing back when they were playing in Tampa. And so that's an example, of that. But it'd be such a great question. If you get one honest answer from Quinn, kind of what's the plan there? And he'd probably say it's situational. It depends on the matchup. It depends on did Trae have a rhythm in the fourth quarter, or did Trae kind of lose his rhythm? There's so many kind of, conditional kind of ways to think about that. But I do think it's fair to acknowledge that it can be a lot harder. You think about him trying to get to the floater. We've seen it before. The defender gives him space. Trae gets stuck. Trae can't step back off of a terminated drive and terminated tip to get to the floater, and he's got a 6'8" defender on him. He's stuck, right? The thing about a 6'1" guard is he's going to get stuck when he doesn't get to the thing that he wants if that gets taken away. The other part of pick and roll is you're inviting a second defender right in his face, right? And so there's a lot of different ways to kind of think about that. But, for last year, DeJounte kind of took care of it. DeJounte, hit. The thing for me is you watch Trae hit a 29-foot 3-pointer to win the game. and you want to go, man, just having the willingness to take that shot is impressive. Then the analytical part of your brain is like, was that a 21% shot? Like, was that a 27% shot? Was that a 30? From a kind of data standpoint, because I think if you ask Quinn would be like, we want the best shot, right? And if we get the shot at the rim, Trae can get us a shot at the rim. We want to get the shot at the rim. But there's that part of the game is politicized as much as any part of the game throughout an NBA season and with superstars. All that is very politicized. And it's just going to be interesting to me to see how Quinn navigates that this year, because they were terrible in the clutch, like brutally bad in the clutch last year.
They were, and the numbers I could share them. They were really bad. You're right. There's no way around that. I do think it may be, and this is simplifying, not having the 2-guard thing and kind of the uncertainty there almost might help them. It might be a little bit cleaner now. Whereas like DeJounte honestly made a bunch of big shots last year. A lot of them were where Trae was off the court, but it was always kind of like a your turn, my turn. There's a little bit of that always with those two guys. And now I feel like everyone's going to understand it's not that it ever stopped being Trae's team on offense, but it's really, really Trae's team again. And it's like, hey, so if there's a live ball, you're going to see a lot of turn and give the ball to Trae. You know what I mean? In a big situation like that. Yeah. And it doesn't mean you can't have other guys shoot. Like Bogey is a great option at the end of a game if you get a breakdown or whatever. Jalen maybe is going to take some steps forward, but I think it'll still be a lot of Trae, I feel like. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Also, this is a subplot.
Like,
go ahead.
Bogey on a catch and shoot is great. I bet Bogey has tried to create his own shot at the end of the game maybe 6 times in his career. Not a lot of experience there, right? And when they had Gallo, they tried to run plays for Gallo. Gallo was like over 100. It felt like over 150 that season when they ran a play for him at the end of the game to create his own shot. He just didn't have the juice anymore, right? And so, but that's the thing is that, like, I think sometimes people are like, run floppy for Bogey or run a pin down or whatever. And it's like, okay, if the design shot is there, great. If you take a guy who's never or who has only a handful of times in his whole career had to create his shot with 4 to go on the shot clock in the game, I think fans don't understand how much pressure is packed into that, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have those reps, if you have not acclimated to what it feels like to problem solve on the fly when the shot that was designed for is not there, it's hard. Now Trae's great at that, but I still think that you need a plan B, you need an alternative, you need something there. And so I'm just looking forward to seeing what Quinn has planned for that area of their play this coming year.
Yeah, we agree, and we don't have to go back over this because we talked about it on different capsules that you and I have done this summer. But one of the big questions, it's not about Trae, but it's kind of about Trae, is like the non-Trae minutes are back to being a big question, which we should at least acknowledge out loud. A lot of that was papered over with DeJounte because it just became the DeJounte offense when Trae sat. And one of the age-old questions that we kind of stopped having to ask the last year and a half was, okay, Trae's on the bench for 12 minutes a game, 14 minutes a game. What the heck happens now on offense? And for a long time, it was basically a guarantee the offense was going to bottom out. The Hawks were unable to create efficient offense with Trae off the floor for 3 years, basically. I have more optimism this year than I had before about that. But how Quinn navigates that personnel-wise, how he navigates that offensive construction-wise is going to be quite. It's tangential to Trae. This is a Trae-focused episode on purpose, but that is a fallout that they have to circle back to now that they didn't have the last 2 years, when it was just like, all right, DeJounte, now you're the point guard, and DJ was comfortable in that role because that's the role he kind of wanted to be in quietly. But now they don't have that guy anymore. There is no plan up. There's no plan A when Trae sits.
Yeah, but I think people, and you and I talked about with Kobe, like it's going to be a big learning curve for him to be the full-time backup point guard next year, which is what I expect to happen, right? A lot of fans are like, is that really going to happen? Like, I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. But when Trae is off, they might play faster in the offensive half court, right? Give the ball up, split cuts on the weak side, move the ball. I mean, you think back to that Chicago game they played last year where they were breaking the paint. Every time the ball rotated, they were breaking the paint, dribble, attacking the seam, and I think when Trae's off, you're going to see, when Trae's on, you've got to balance out the scheme with his natural abilities. We talked about that earlier here. But when Trae is off, I think you're going to see a lot more reliance on system and scheme and ball movement and cutting and all that sort of stuff. And if someone wants to be frustrated because like, well, why can't they do that with Trae's on? Like, okay, like I said, you've got to balance Trae's strengths with that stuff. So I think they're going to be very system oriented and pace and play at a faster pace than the offensive half court when Trae's off. And I think that's how they're going to try to thrive in the non-Trae minutes, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by that. So we can wrap up now, Glenn. But I mean, Trae is really interesting. I think that it may not seem that way on the surface, but I promise I have notes now. We could go another hour. It sounds crazy. I have more stuff we could talk about. We shouldn't because we've already gone long. But yeah, I as much as we know who Trae is, there's a lot of noise around him. There's a lot of discussion around him. There's a lot of team building aspects that we've talked about, some that are always going to be there, and big decisions ahead. Because I mean, I talked about it a lot in the last 6 months, even especially the last 3 months. But this is the first time in his tenure, and he's going into year 7, where it is no longer a certainty that Trae Young is the franchise player of the Atlanta Hawks moving forward. That is not a certainty. It is not anymore. I'm not saying that's not a value judgment by me. That's just where the market has been, where the Hawks have messaged things. They've kind of prioritized Jalen in their discussions with other teams. Like, Trae has not been the golden goose, untouchable guy in their mind. And maybe that changes again. Maybe they win 45 games this year. He has a great season, and he's back to that spot. They extend him, all those things. That's also very possible. A year from now, we could talk about Trae signing a max extension with the Hawks. Would not surprise me at all. But also, we could talk about Trae being on the trade block in a year. It's a big year for everybody involved. Quinn,
and part of that is how that's the thing. For part of it's how the Hawks feel. Part of that is how Trae feels. So
exactly. I mean, that's the other thing we'll not talk about now. But like, I mean, there's always been this worry that maybe I don't know if that's the word for it now, that maybe Trae doesn't want to be here anymore at some point, and that's I don't know. So the vibe. This is not a vibes podcast a lot. I do talk about vibes sometimes, but like, it's a big vibes year too. Like, there are degrees. If the Hawks go 40-42 this year, but the vibes are way better, and like they're looking like they have young guys that are turning the corner, and Trae's happy and they're feeling better, that's okay. Like, that's a step forward from where they were last year. But if they don't, if they go 40-42 and everybody's miserable, like there is nuance around this whole thing. And this is a Trae episode, but he is. I mean, was it Nate that called him the head of a snake? Was that that was a term they used to use a lot around the team, calling Trae the head of a snake. So he still is. Yep. It's still his team at the end of the day. He's still the best player by a wide margin.
That reflects Nate's generation, which is my generation of when I first started watching. So yeah, I mean, Bud used that all the time, right? So.
Oh yeah, but no, yeah. I'm intrigued. So, I appreciate you doing.
Yeah, it's gonna be fast. It's gonna be fascinating.
Yeah, Glenn, thank you for being here. As always, we've fought through internet issues. You've had a long week. You've had a lot going on. I appreciate your flexibility. We're recording this on a Friday night. We have one more of these to do. If I can twist your arm, we got Jalen Johnson still looming. So that'll be happening at some point someone asked me the other day, is like, are these going to be done by media day? No, I don't think Jalen's going to be done by media day, but it'll be close enough. Where can folks find all of your musings, Glenn, if they want to find more of your work? If they do not, for some reason, they haven't found you already. They should have already done this, but where can they find all of what you have to offer on the Hawks?
Yeah. So ATL and 29 podcasts, my good friends, Kevin Chenard and Kevin and Tyler, Tyler bringing all of the entertainment value and all of the energy to that podcast. And Kevin just being an all-around smart basketball guy, fun to listen to. At Willis_Glenn, if you're on YouTube, you can see it there. If not, find me on Twitter or X, whatever you're calling it. And I don't know. Should I do a Kevon Harris video breakdown, Brad?
I believe it's Kevon.
Do I need to stick him up one more time?
Yeah, it's actually Kevon from what I'm told. Yeah, sure.
Why did I forget that?
I don't think I knew it until I looked it up for the podcast. So as I watched a little bit before I did the podcast about him on Friday. and I knew of him from Stephen F. Austin, but like I am not a Kevon Harris expert, so I would learn from a Phil Brady. If you want to go super sicko mode, if you're just bored over the weekend, then absolutely, Glenn, fire away.
Yeah, I know. This is what you get at the end of a long work week with me pronouncing names wrong and stuff like that. So, as like the last time we recorded, I was referring to LaMelo and I said Lonzo. So this is, I'm just glad it wasn't worse, But this weekend we're getting away, so not gonna happen this weekend. But maybe next weekend I'll drop 8 to 10 plays on Kevon Harris. Is it another defender with size that can play the guard position? So. Stack them up, Gwen and Landry. Keep stacking them up. So
they are trying to do just that. Again, one more time, thank you, Glenn, for doing this. We'll have one more at some point. And for everybody else, enjoy the next day. I don't know when I'm posting this, so stay tuned. Media Day is coming. This will be up before Media Day, so please stay tuned. Subscribe to the podcast. Check out AT on 29. Follow Glenn, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Like this show as you're watching it, by the way. And we'll sign off now. Thanks again, Glenn, and we'll see everybody next time.